afternoon to in-house counsel from all across North America. Welcome to In-House Connect. My name is Shai Mahani. I am the CEO and co-founder of In-House Connect, and I'm thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you for spending your breakfast time or your lunch time with us, and thank you to our amazing presenter today, Rich Bracken, and our fantastic sponsor, Axiom. Axiom is one of the best alternative legal service providers in the country, in the world. PM me to learn more about Axiom. It's a fantastic opportunity for those who are looking for more flexible working arrangement, or if you're looking to staff up for your legal organizations and don't have the capacity to do it so quickly. Axiom is fantastic, and I'm happy to talk about Axiom offline. Those of you here for the first time, let me give you a quick bit of background on In-House Connect. In-House Connect started over 12 years ago as a New York City-based meetup group. We met in New York City, and every month a different law firm would host us for a free CLE and a cocktail networking reception. And every 6 months, we would organize fun and festive networking mixers. And hopefully, I'm hoping to get back to doing in-person events. So stay tuned for more on that. Over the years, we've helped thousands of in-house counsel connect with peers and outside counsel alike. The group was humming along, and then, of course, COVID hit. We couldn't meet in person, so we met online. And it's been a fantastic, fantastic transition. We've been able to attract a much larger audience of in-house counsel from coast to coast. And we've been able to feature high caliber speakers like the one we have today, who I'm going to introduce in just a few minutes. First, this is our 44th event of the year, and I'm wondering, are you here for the first time, or have you attended an IHC event before? We have 20% first timers and 80% returning. So hello to the 20%, welcome, and welcome back to the 80%. I hope everybody enjoys the program. All right. Today's event is Stress and Time Management Basics for In-House Counsel. Our speaker today is Rich Bracken. Rich is a keynote speaker, media personality, and marketing executive. He routinely works with companies, firms, and individuals across the country looking to establish sustainable change and improvement in their approach to achieving their business and culture goals. Rich is a frequent speaker and writer on topics such as emotional intelligence, leadership, goal setting and achievement, sales, client service, and presentation skills, and serves as a speaker coach to attorneys, executives, and sales leaders. As a writer and media personality, he has been featured through such media channels as Fox News, CBS, ABC, Vice Media, Reader's Digest, Thrive Global, and has worked with such global organizations as MDRT, Meeting Professionals International, Legal Value Network, Legal Marketing Association, Legal Innovators. I believe that's Colin McCarthy's group. Rich is fantastic. If you are looking for team building exercises for your legal department, like a lunch and learn, something inspirational to, help your legal department connect with each other, definitely consider or reach out to Rich to talk about some departmental workshops. A nice 1 hour or 2 hour workshop would really be a great team building exercise at the legal department. So that's my plug for Rich. Shameless plug. I'm a big fan of Rich, and I really enjoy his thought leadership. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Rich to get us started.
Thank you, Shai. And this is your cue to go ahead and take a breath. I mean, for whatever reason this doesn't work out, I think you have a future as an auctioneer for sure. I saw Bang Energy in there. Maybe Bang Energy needs a spokesperson. I think what you just did was amazing. So thank you so much, number one, for everyone being here. This is like Shai said, this is not a CLE, but it is an ROE that is very high. And what I mean by that, it's return on effort. The fact that you're even here is a really good positive indication that you are looking out not only for yourself, but for your performance as an individual, both personally and professionally. But also, there are going to be things that you can take back to your team. As Shai mentioned, I have been working with in-house teams all over the world, providing these types of workshops so that there is higher levels of happiness, lower levels of stress, because we all need those kinds of things. But today, I want to focus on you. I want to focus on what you're here for, and I want to focus on the things that I can provide to you in this impactful moment. So today is going to be a lot of focus on stress and time management through mindfulness and emotional intelligence, because a few years ago, there were lots of things going on prior to the pandemic, but ever since the pandemic, everything's just kind of gone out the window. But the silver lining is that we've had better and more thorough conversations in the legal environment, specifically about self-care and wellness and mental health and things that you can do to be better every single day for you, for your friends and family, for your colleagues, for your clients. Everybody benefits when you take care of yourself. So again, this is going to be very high ROE. This is going to be a very fun presentation, and hopefully there are going to be lots of things that you can take and implement immediately. I just had an opportunity to present to legal operators last week at their conference, and there were takeaways that people implemented that day, that next morning, and reported back that they had immediate impact. So I want to share those with you today and really focus in on how you can be more mindful in your day and how you can take advantage of these takeaways to be happier and less stressed. Because again, who doesn't want that? Now, the one thing that will differ from last week to this week is the fact that I want you to be present in this conversation. I want you to be very focused on what's going on. I know that we are wonderful multitaskers when our cameras are off or when we're on a webinar, but I'm going to put you on the honor system here. I'd love for you, if you wouldn't mind, to take your phone, put it face down, turn off any notifications or sounds, and then also close any other windows that may be up on your screen right now, because the research shows we are not good multitaskers. Nobody is a good multitasker. You cannot scientifically multitask and focus on anything with a dedicated amount of energy that you're going to benefit from it as much as possible. So I'm trusting you to put your phone down and turn your other windows off. But I promise you also that the benefit of this will be tenfold and maybe even 20-fold what you're going to get out of this. So I understand maybe we can come up with a support group that we are disconnecting from our phones for the next 30, 40 minutes, but I will make sure you are taken care of. Now, I don't know if you understand what this is or if you've ever seen one of these before. Hopefully you've only seen them on a TV show. And this is an EKG readout. And this is my why I talk about this specifically in the legal industry. Back in about 2016, I was working in a big law firm, and with that comes a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety, a lot of hectic schedules, and a lot of long hours. And there was one day that I'm in my office working on a project, and all of a sudden I had all the WebMD indications of a heart attack. And my shoulder, I started going numb, my extremities started tingling, my heart rate was going up, I was very flush. And I got up from my desk and I walked by my CMO's office, and I didn't even look in the office. I didn't even slow down. I said, I'm driving myself to the emergency room. Something's really, really wrong. And so I go to the emergency room, they hook me up to all the machines, and then they leave me, which, what better way to lower your stress than being plugged into a whole bunch of stuff and then left by yourself to listen to the beeping noise. But it was in that moment that I understood what was going on, the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just me not feeling well, but something was really, really wrong. Now, thankfully, when the doctor did come back in to talk with me about what they found, it wound up being a panic attack and not a heart attack. But therein lied the opportunity for him to engage me and talk about how I can manage my stress better. He told me about this concept called emotional intelligence. And from that point forward, I started studying emotional intelligence like my life depended on it, because it did. And in those discoveries, in that education for myself, I found a lot of benefits, not only for me that were working, but then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I need to tell the world about this. As if you couldn't tell by the painting and the stormtrooper helmet over here to my side, I'm a little bit of an animated personality. So through my thought leadership and my speaking, I had to bring this message to our industry, because let's face it, our industry is wrought with stress, is wrought with substance abuse and high levels of burnout. So whatever I could do to serve the industry and help make people better, I was going to do it, because honestly, this was me on a daily basis. I was constantly running, constantly chasing, constantly in my email, constantly on my text messages. Wasn't nearly as handsome as this guy, but I was doing exactly this. If there was an image that portrayed what I was going through, it was this image, because I just could not slow down. I couldn't afford to. That was what my job was asking me for. And so this is how I lived my life. I'm constantly on the run. And so when I decided that it was important for me to be more mindful, that is when I started working on myself to be better for myself and better for my firm, better for my family. And now mindfulness is something that we, talk about, and some people are like, oh, that's this far out concept and all of these, these different things. But I understand now how important it is. Now, I'm not going to be one of those speakers that reads the definition to you, but really is all about being very conscious of who you are and what's going on around you, understanding all of those things that make up your surroundings, make up the things that impact you on a daily basis. And with all of these presentations that I give, I always make it very crystal clear. This is not going to make you oblivious to a bad day. This is not going to make you oblivious to negativity. But what it is also going to help you do is manage it appropriately, because so many times we just throw our energy and throw our emotions to the whims of whoever wants it. And that is what contributes to our burnout. That's what contributes to us being very negative or exhausted on a daily basis, or in high stress situations where we may have to turn to substances to balance those things out. Or a lot of individuals will just get to a point where they don't acknowledge what they need to improve themselves, because again, we think that we can just push through it. Oh, I'll take care of it later, or I'll be better soon. I just got to get through this one project. I've got to get through these meetings. I've got to do all these things. And you never stop. You never stop to do those things. You never stop to take care of yourself. And it's like that individual in the picture, we're constantly on to the next thing. So by being mindful, this is really slowing down and understanding the impacts of what's going on around you. Now, what it is not, although this may sound fantastic, and I will jump at any opportunity to do this, but it is not going and sitting on a rock in the middle of the wilderness and meditating for 3 straight days, although that does sound good. I'm sure, you know, if you've ever thought about this, give me a yes in the chat. You know, anything that we could just do to disconnect and not do anything, anything that we can do to remove all the stimulus. Here they come, all these individuals that are going to start saying yes, because this looks fantastic. Mindfulness is also not this. Although if you see one of your coworkers doing this, go on and leave them alone. Just let them have their time, let them do what they need to do to get through it. Now, this may look very extreme, but what I'm going to show you today and what I'm going to talk about are opportunities that you can be mindful like this, maybe not as on your desk as this, but ways that you can do it in very short amount of time, and also very deliberate activity. Because in our industry, and I know this just as well as you do, our industry, time is money. And it is really critical that we maximize every single minute of every single day, every single second that goes on. So the things I'm going to give you are very practical. They're very easy to do. Most of them are very fun to do, but they're also going to give you a lot of, like I said, ROE, a lot of return on effort. That is really going to be important that you understand that, because I don't want to give you anything that's going to take an inordinate amount of time, like the 3-week meditation on a rock in the middle of a lake, but things that you can do in anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes, because we all have the same amount of minutes in a day. You know, I make sure in all of my presentations in the legal industry, I make sure I have one definition and one statistic minimum. So you had your definition, here's your statistic. We all have the same number. We all have 1,440 minutes in a single day. It's what you do with them that makes all the difference in the world, because we sometimes find that we give all of our minutes away to everything else that calls for our attention. Sometimes we're almost like a free t-shirt giveaway. Just anybody that runs up and can take a t-shirt, it's just taking minutes from us, taking time from us, taking energy from us. Again, if you feel that way or have ever felt that way, please drop a yes in the chat, because I think we all, even if you don't admit it, I'm going to call you out on the carpet and say, hey, look, you probably have felt that way. You know, whether it's demanding of meetings, demanding of projects, you're roped into something that you feel like you can't say no to. But mindfulness allows you to take back that power in those moments and be more present and understand what you can do to be more mindful about your decision-making and your ability to seize those moments within a day. It is really important, because at the same time, we feel like this. This may, you know, I was looking for, you know, images and pictures that showed what chaos feels like. And this to me is chaotic. This sometimes feels like my days. Even though I speak about this all the time, I study it all the time, I still have days where my mind, my schedule, my energy looks just like this. Yes, I agree, Julia, there's a lot competing for our attention. There are the demands of work. There are social media, you know, notifications. There are emails. There are phone calls. There are meetings. That, you know, we'll get to meeting calendars here in a little bit. But there, you know, and that's just work life. You know, all the demands of our work life. And then we also have a personal life. Some of you may have forgotten what that feels like. I forgot at one point too, what my personal life felt like, what my happiness as an individual felt like. But by being more mindful, we're reminded of what this can be. And it's not just managing your stress, but it's also managing your productivity. Because I, like anybody else, have had those situations where I get a little bit lost in the day because there are so many things competing, because there are times where it's easy to knock out like 2 or 3 things in a day. But when you're overwhelmed, when you've got so much going on, when it feels like everybody is asking for a meeting with you, when everybody's asking for something to be done by an unrealistic deadline, sometimes we just shut down. Sometimes we just lose our focus because we're so overwhelmed, and we just become, it's almost like a circuit, like a power circuit being overloaded. Everything just goes dark, and we lose our focus. And sometimes we just need to pause and feel like we are in control. Now, this is one of those situations where I want to share that this example, this image is perfect for what you can do. This image can be you on a daily basis in just a few seconds, because it is really critical to understand that by being more mindful, you will reduce your anxiety, you will reduce your stress, you will reduce depression, even chronic pain, because a lot of times our physical pain is due to our emotional pain or the stress that we take on mentally. And so we incur these different physical aspects because of that fact. And again, by being just a little bit mindful in a situation where maybe you are overwhelmed, and it's just a matter of taking a very deep breath. And I want you all to do that right now with me. Take a big inhale and hold it, and then let it out. Even something as simple as that just will release a lot of the stress, will release a lot of the anxiety, because we do. Like, think about the last time you got that email that sent you into panic mode. What do? You tense up. You feel that tension in your, even if you clench your hands and you're waiting to respond to the email, but you're like, oh, that person, it's that person again. We all have that one person that just triggers us. The minute they show up in our inbox, we're like, oh, if they're on this webinar, don't call them out. We'll protect the innocent today. But we have those situations where someone or something sends us into that stress mode. And so by taking just a few seconds to really realize what we can do to take our breath back, to take back time, to really focus in on what we can do to be more present in the moment, that is what you need to do starting today. Now, with all of these things, to make it so easy to be more mindful, why do we make it so hard on ourselves to actually do it? If there's so many easy ways to be mindful, how come we don't think about it? But that's what that today is all about. Because think about it. If you are in a situation where you are practicing an emergency drill, when we think back to school, and I want to test your school knowledge here. What were you taught if you happen to catch fire? If you're in a fire drill, or if something's going on and there it is. Emma's first. See, you understand that because you were told not when something was actually happening, but prior to, so that when something did happen, it was important that you understood that. It is not a situation where, Emma's always quick on the draw here. But you don't want to, somebody's not going to go, hey, I understand you're on fire. Now's probably a good chance to stop, drop, and roll. It's going to help you suffocate the flame. Like, they're not going to tell you that when something is actually going on. So today is all about putting those practices in place and those easy, simple tricks to be more mindful, to take back that stress. Because again, this is not a situation where you're on fire. Maybe you came in on fire, but I'm going to have you leave maybe a little bit, maybe your pant leg is smoking a little bit, but we're going to put those flames out. We're going to give you the opportunity to be more mindful and take that power back. Now, one of my favorite things to do, and this is a new trick that I've started trying and it works. This is something that I encouraged people to do last week. That is the easiest thing to do for some of us. Now, this took a little bit of training, because what is the first thing that we do when we wake up? We grab our phone. We look at what we miss. We look at our emails. We look at social media, even before we turn the light on sometimes. So today, we'll wash it away. Tomorrow morning, what I want you to do is when you wake up, I want this to be you. Spend a couple of minutes just sitting in bed, laying in bed. Your alarm's going to go off on your phone. Turn the alarm off. That's the only time you can touch your phone. So when you turn that alarm off, put your phone face down and lay there for 2 minutes maximum. 2 minutes is all you need. And understand that it is your time to do nothing, to breathe, to understand that you are present in the moment, to feel what your feelings feel, to understand what your body feels like, to understand what energy you're bringing to the day. And sometimes we just need to remember that we are breathing, that we're human individuals, and that we are about to approach the day, that things are going to influence us. And so isn't it nice, going back to the picture of the 3-week meditation, this is your 2-minute opportunity to do this every single day, and it's a game changer. If you just stop for 2 minutes first thing in the morning and just don't do anything. And I mean, if you're like me, I'm a huge Peloton fan. I get up at 5 in the morning and do my Peloton. I started setting my alarm for 4:58 because I needed to have that 2 minutes to prep my mind, to prep my energy, and to be ready to attack the day. Because typically it was, I'd get up, look at my phone, I'd be looking at my phone while I'm getting ready to go, get my workout in. But I was being overstimulated as I was going into my morning routine. So I'm thinking, oh, hey, I'm getting up and doing my Peloton. I'm in a good space, I'm taking care of myself, but I was constantly looking at my phone, on the way downstairs, making my coffee, going downstairs, setting up the room, setting up my Peloton. I would literally have my phone in my hand the entire time until I actually started the ride. So it's in that time, because honestly, we look at our phones way too much, that it would be great to say, you know what, my phone is not going to control me. This is my time in the morning. This is my time to set my intention for the day. And this is what's going to make my day better and make me better for everyone else. Now, it is important to understand that that's how you're going to set your day. But then what happens after that completely is up to the world, because we are going to have stimulus like crazy. We're going to have people setting up meetings and emailing us and calling us. We're going to go into the office, or if you're connecting remotely, you're going to be engaging other people. Now, that is where other stimulus come into play. And that's where you need to really be mindful of how you're engaging these individuals, how you're letting their energy affect you, and how you can control the narrative, how you can set the boundaries, how you can be the one that puts up the white picket fence around your yard to make sure that nobody steps on your mental real estate. That is where you become more mindful. That's where you take control of everything that is going on. Now, when we get into those situations where we are inundated, where we are getting all kinds of stimulus, it is sometimes hard to keep your focus, because again, you're trying to think of all the things you're doing throughout the day. Your mind starts to wander. Now, if you've ever felt like this, I know I have, where you're just staring off into space and you're getting distracted, or you're multitasking or attempting to multitask, because again, we're not multitaskers by scientific proof. So if you have those opportunities to really focus in on what you're doing and what's around you, that is where you take control back. Because again, we've all felt like this. And it's important to understand that when these feelings start creeping up, again, starting your day more mindful, you'll be able to pick up when you're feeling distracted, when you feel like you're losing your energy, when you feel like you're trying to do too much. And it's at that moment that I encourage you to do what I call the spy movie trick. And what I mean by that is that I had a moment one day where I had too much going on. I wasn't being effective. I was, have you ever had one of those emails that and drop a yes in the chat if you felt this way? I'm sure you probably have. That it probably would have taken me 30 seconds, maybe a minute, to actually write the email and send it and be done with it. But I have this window up and that window up and that window up, and my phone is going off and I'm looking at this, and my Slack is going off. So I'm looking at my Slack messages, and that one draft email is sitting up there that should have taken 60 seconds, but then took 60 minutes. Or at the end of the day, I'm like, damn, I didn't send that email because it was hidden behind a whole bunch of other windows. And then you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I meant to send you that email this morning, but it was hidden behind all my windows, and I just totally forgot. So I called this the spy trick. So if you've ever watched any movie where there's some sort of like a spy issue, or there's or a storyline, or somebody's got like those glasses that they put on, and the immediate threats light up, or I'm thinking about like Tom Cruise and Will Smith movies, where all of a sudden you see the threats, you see the things that are going on. That's what I did. I literally, sitting at this desk, pushed back from my desk and did a peripheral scan of my entire office, not just my screen, but my desk, my walls, all of everything. And I identified quickly what is distracting me. What is pulling my energy away? And most of the culprits were on my screen in front of me. Yes, my phone, as all of our phones are a constant pull on our attention. So yes, that was the first thing that I did was I turned my phone over, put it face down so I couldn't see, turn the ringer off, turn the notifications off so that I couldn't see my phone because I needed to focus in on a project and get it done because I was on a timeline. The next thing I did was I looked at my screen. And at that time, I had 2 screens. Why? Because I didn't have enough space on one screen for all the windows. How dumb is that? So, I added the second monitor to be able to shift things out of the way. It's kind of like almost like digital hoarding on my screens, where I had a Word doc and a PowerPoint and an Excel document. I had a couple window browsers. How many tabs do we have open in our brains? Same thing on our browsers. I had so much going on. I had Slack open. I had Twitter open. I had all these things. And I pushed back and looked and went, no wonder I can't focus on this one email sitting in front of me because I've got 17 things in my peripheral all pulling on my attention. So when I closed all of them out and I focused in on the one thing, all the things were minimized and or shut down, I all of a sudden got the one project done that I needed to focus on. But again, we get so caught up in those times where we're trying to do all the things. We're trying to do all the things at once. You cannot do all the things at once. You can't do 2 things at the same time with effectiveness. As I sit here with my multitasking setup for my speaking, I will say that none of us are effective at multitasking. We just aren't. And so it's really important that you understand when you have those moments where you feel like, this one thing is taking forever, absolutely forever. Clean it all out, close it all down, close your inbox, close your Outlook, close your Slack, close all those things and focus in. My favorite trick is to turn on your out of office assistant. Most of us think about this for vacations or conferences or something like that. If I'm working on a project and I know that people may try to get a hold of me, and especially if it's going to take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour, I will set my out of office assistant to say, hey, look, I'm working on a deadline driven project for the next 45 minutes. I will be available at this time. If the world is on fire, please call my cell phone. Here's the number. And the only thing I would have on notifications on my phone was the ringer, just because if there's an emergency, I want to be able to be reached. But at that point, you're also setting the boundary for other people that may be emailing you with expectation. They may be emailing you thinking, oh, well, I emailed Rich 30 minutes ago and he hasn't returned my email. It's something, I really need this. But if you communicate that boundary and say, hey, look, I will be available in 45 minutes, but for right now, this is my time to do what I need to do for me. How good does that feeling feel? That you can just say, I've got to do what's right for me. I've got to do what I need to do. I need to prioritize me first. We, by default, give away that privilege, that demand for ourselves, because we prioritize the needs of others too often. And we don't set the proper boundaries to say, hey, look, I need to be the best that I can be, and I need to get the things done that I need to get done. But we're constantly worried that, oh, well, if I'm not available, then they'll find somebody else to do it, or maybe I'll devalue myself by doing it. No, you will be in demand. You will be needed just as much, but even better, you're setting the proper boundaries to protect yourself and to produce a better product for whatever you're trying to do, or maybe it is a project. But in that time, when you're being more mindful about your boundaries, your time, your energy, your effort, that is the most critical thing. I agree, Jennifer. Establishing boundaries is very challenging. It's one of those things that when the first couple times I did it, it was almost like I haven't gone skydiving yet, but I can imagine it's kind of like that, stepping on the edge of that open door. You're about to jump out of a perfectly good plane. You have that fear because we're natural people pleasers. We want to give, we want to do for others. We want to be liked by others. We feel like because we say yes, it's going to earn us a lot of respect. But if you constantly are taking on the needs, wants, and desires of others, it's like walking around, starting your day with your arms out like this. I'm trying to get my arms, and I feel like Ricky Bobby in Talladega Nights right now, but putting your arms out and walking into work and just letting whoever pile whatever on your arms. At some point, you're going to break. At some point, you're going to drop something. So by setting those boundaries, although it's challenging, start with small boundaries. Start with small things that you can push back on. Again, the out of office thing is really important, especially if you're working remotely, or even if you're in an office. Set that out of office assistant. I did it during the pandemic for 5-minute water breaks. And same thing. Hey, I'm gone for the next 5 minutes. I will be back at my desk at 11:40. If you need me, I'll be available then. Until then, I'm unavailable at this time. And not only did I never get pushback from that, I actually got complimented, and people were like, "Oh my God, that's fantastic." It is really important that you take those little steps. It's like anything else. You're retraining a behavior to be more mindful and set better boundaries. Start small. You don't have to tell your CEO like, "Hey, look, I'm going to start setting boundaries now. I'm just going to need you to respect that." So, start small, implement those little small changes, and it'll get easier as time goes by. So that in of itself is a game changer. Now, the other thing that is a big time game changer, because again, I talked about the fact that we don't pay attention to our own needs enough. And we don't stop and slow down and understand that we need to check in with ourselves. We're so quick to check in on other people. We're so quick to worry about what other people are doing. So I started a practice not too long ago called the Mindful 3. Now this, I promise you, is a game changer. What the Mindful 3 is a great excuse for you to slow down. And again, this doesn't take any time. I mean, it takes a very minimal amount of time. I shouldn't say it doesn't take any time, but it takes a minimal amount of time to invest in your well-being. This could probably take, on the whole, 1.5 minutes of your day. If 1.5 minutes of your day, of the 1,440 minutes, is not important, then we need to have a bigger conversation. But if you could take 1.5 minutes for yourself, this changes the dynamic of how you approach your day and how you take the best care of yourself possible. Now, what I want to do is explain what the Mindful 3 is. And again, I'm a simpleton. It helps me remember things. I like things that are repetitive. And so that is what I'm going to introduce to you now. The Mindful 3 has one question, and it's repeated 3 times in 3 different ways. The first one, how are you? And this is the aesthetic of our body. Because a lot of times, again, our mindfulness, our mental capacity, our mental health is tied to our physical being. And then conversely, our physical well-being also impacts our mental health. Think about being, if anybody has ever been fatigued because they were working long hours and had to get up early, drop a yes in the chat or a thumbs up or whatever you want to do, because we've all been there. We don't take good care of ourselves. We are physically pushing ourselves and mentally pushing ourselves to the brink at times. And that is not good, because it is important to take care of our bodies, to take care of the physical presence that we have. It has a big impact, a much bigger impact than you think. So again, taking 30 seconds to say, how are you? Or how am I? And just focusing on just your body. Question number 2, how are you? How is your mind? How is your mind feeling? What is going on in your mind? What things are you thinking about? What things are taking your mental capacity away that you are unable to focus, that you are frustrated, that you are overwhelmed with things? I got to a point where I had more to-do lists and checklists of things because I just didn't have the mental capacity to keep everything in line, to keep all my deadlines and timelines and projects and nuances within the project and preferences of individuals. I was so overwhelmed, but I would not admit it to myself because I thought it was a weakness. I thought it was me saying, well, I'm not good enough to remember all of these things. And, at times I would work with up to 500 attorneys at a time who all had something different that they wanted. And so to keep all those things straight took a burden. And that's just work. That's just understanding individuals that I worked with. That's just table stakes. So imagine all the things that you take on mentally, all the things you have to remember, all the things you have to keep straight in your mind. That takes its toll. Our minds, I always say they're like an iPhone battery, or, if you're an Android person, sorry. But if you're, your iPhone battery, the minute your iPhone battery gets low, what happens? You panic and plug it in, right? You would do anything to find a charger. You do anything. Like imagine running out of battery in an airport. If you've ever seen people scramble for the pole, I did it the other day in San Francisco, where I'm looking for a charger port because my phone was running out of battery. We don't do that for our minds. We don't worry as much. We don't go into that much of a panic because we're like, oh, we're fine. I've got capacity on the other side. I just got to push through this one project and I'll be just fine. but then you're not. And you don't take the time on the back end of that project to check in with yourself and do those things. So again, say, how are you? Or how am I? Physical being. How am I mentally? And then finally, and Emma, I'm gonna ask you not to be quick on the draw. What do you think the next question is? How are you? How are you emotionally? How is your heart? How are your feelings? What is going on? Now, I will be the first to say that I am a high empath. I'm a highly sensitive person, but I also talked with a gentleman last week that imagine the biggest, meanest looking dude that you can imagine that works in legal. That may be somebody this guy looked like he could be a bouncer / football player. This dude is huge. And we were talking about this concept of checking in with our feelings. And for him to look at me and say, you know what, I don't do that enough. And I've got a lot of things weighing on my heart. Like, here I am watching this guy like be vulnerable right in front of me because of a simple question. And how often do you do that? How often do you check in with your emotions? Because again, in our industry, and this is not a slam against our industry or slam against anybody, we're taught to put emotion aside at times. We're objective in nature. You have to be perfect in your decision making. A lot of the times, emotion kind of gets pushed to the side. And, especially if you're trying to get through a stressful thing or a hard project or a difficult conversation, it's like, I'll have time for emotion later on. I'll deal with this later on. And we don't. Again, we push it aside. We don't pay attention to it. So it's the 3 questions, same question. How am I? How am I? How am I? How are you? For your body, your mind, and your heart. So it's at this point that I actually want to put this into practice. So what we're going to do, I want you to pause. And if you're moving, then I don't know how you're watching a presentation moving, but let's find a place to sit down. If you're driving, please don't close your eyes. But if you're sitting at your desk, close your eyes or keep them closed enough where you can still see a little bit. But I want to spend the next 10 seconds times 3. And I want you to think about these questions. I'm going to ask you the question, and I want you to concentrate on the different aspects, the different levels of who you are. So the first one is, how are you? How are you physically? Second one, how are you? How are you mentally? Third, how are you? How are you emotionally? Go ahead and open your eyes if you did close them. Now, within that, and maybe it takes a little bit longer, but maybe something bubbled up. Maybe something came to your attention because, again, you took the time to stop. You took 30 seconds for yourself to stop and focus on the different levels of who you are and focus on the different things that impact who you are as an individual, both personally and professionally. And if something did come up, because the first time I did this, a lot of things came up. I'm dealing with aging parents, and I'm dealing with work, and I'm dealing with a potential, we're moving, that's stressful enough in and of itself. So within that, if something did come up, if something did disrupt your thoughts, if something was, coming to the surface that you have been pushing down or pushing to the side for too long, I want you to practice empathy with yourself. It's okay to have these things come up. It's okay to admit that you're stressed out. It's okay to admit that you're overwhelmed, because it is up to you to let people know. It's up to you to declare what you can and can't do, what you do and don't need, and what is going to be best for you. Because if you don't raise your hand, how is anybody going to know how to help you, or how to offload something, or how to delegate something that could go to somebody else? Or maybe you just need the boundaries to be able to say it yourself. Because I will tell you this, the minute you start admitting to yourself and understanding that you are a human being who has these needs, these physical, mental, and emotional needs, you're not ever going to perform at your best level. That is absolutely something that I will discuss with anyone. You cannot perform at an optimal level unless these 3 things are in check. Now, again, I'm not saying that any of these 3 things are always going to be perfect, because they're not. So at some point, there was one day that I tried this that, physically I felt good. Mentally, I was a little bit scattered, but emotionally, I had been, my mom is not in great shape. Emotionally, I had been pushing that down because I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to think about it because it was stressing me out. It was causing me a lot of heartache. It was distracting me from the things I needed to do. But it was okay for me to admit that. It was okay for me to say, this is something that I've been avoiding. And I took some time to acknowledge it. I took some time to acknowledge those emotions. And I was better because of it. I felt better. I felt lighter emotionally. I felt lighter mentally. And physically, I felt better. I felt like I'd been carrying this weight on my shoulders and I was just shoulder forward. My shoulders were drawn in all the time because I was avoiding this issue. And when I acknowledged it, when I dealt with it for a little bit of time, it's not fixed and it won't be fixed for a while. But at the same time, it allowed me in that moment to say, hey, look, it's okay, deal with it and move on for now. But as opposed to just ignoring it and pushing it to the side. Now, within that, so if there was something that came up, again, I'm not going to ask you to put it in the chat because that's personal to you. But what I want you to do is find time today to acknowledge that. If you want to jot it down now, that's great. I'm not going to, make sure it's not on your phone because your phone is supposed to be down still. And I'll let you get your phone out here in just a minute, but grab a piece of paper, write it down. Maybe I'm exhausted. I've not been sleeping well lately. I've not been maintaining a healthy eating habit. I've not been exercising as much as I would like to. I have not been doing things for me. When was the last time you inserted intentional joy into your day? That is key to any kind of success because we can only do so much moving forward and hustling and grinding it out until we start inserting intentional joy. We're not going to have that kind of balance that we need in our lives. So write down something that maybe popped up in that 30-second exercise. After this webinar, if you want to go take more time, go for a walk. You don't have to close your eyes. I just do it because it's more meditative for me, but you can go for a walk, go for a 5-minute walk, go get some coffee and sort through those thoughts. How are you on those 3 levels? And then jot down something that may have come up. When you write it down, you acknowledge it, it becomes more real. You're more apt to do something about it, as opposed to, I've not been sleeping well, but I'll fix that. If you say, I have not been sleeping well, I need to be intentional about my sleep patterns. I need to be intentional about my boundaries to get to sleep earlier so that I can wake up more refreshed. Do that. Write it down, make it happen. Be very intentional with what you're doing. Now, speaking of time and schedules, this may look like something that you're going through as well. I am a big proponent of time management because in this, I will ask for yeses in the chat, and Emma, I think you'll probably be first on this one too. If your calendar currently or has ever looked like a cascading row of color blocks with no gap in between, because you're saying yes to all the meetings, drop a yes in the chat, because this is one of the most damaging but controllable things that you can possibly have happen at work. Because again, all due respect, like I have worked with clients for the last 10 years working in law firms, and I've worked with my in-house clients and talked to them about schedule management and time management and speaking to all these organizations. I've talked with more individuals that this is one of the #1 struggles. I also wish I had $1 for every time somebody would say, oh, I'd love to do all these things, Rich. I don't have time. I call BS. You do have time. You've just given your time. You've given a big, vast chunk of your 1440 to someone else or to other people or to other things. It is so important that you manage your own schedule. You can't manage time because time's just going to go whether you like it or not, but you can manage what you do with it. You can manage what takes up that time, what is taking your attention and your time in your schedule. So a couple different things. #1, I would like to abolish 30-minute and 60-minute meetings. And here's why. If you set 20-minute meetings and 45-minute meetings, a couple things happen. #1, and I'm trust me, I am the most social person, and I can, obviously, if you're figuring this out, I can talk all day long. And I love relationships. But if I have a project that needs pointed attention, if I need to get some progress done on something, I'm setting a 20-minute meeting or I'm setting a 45-minute meeting. What that indicates to the individuals that you're meeting with is that things need to get done. Sure, we could do 60, but we're going to probably spend 15 minutes talking about things that don't matter, going off on tangents. If you have 20 or 45-minute meetings, you're going to stay more on point. You're going to get to the point. You're going to stay on track with what's going on. But also, What that allows you to do is block that 10 minutes or that 15 minutes after the fact to download what just happened. So let's just use a scenario. You have a 45-minute meeting with your team. There are 5 takeaways, 3 delegations, and 4 or 5 other things that came out of that meeting because you were being very pointed. Now, if you were going in that cascade version, what's going to happen? If that was a 60-minute meeting, you're all of a sudden on to the next meeting, probably 2 minutes late. Sorry, I'm late. Sorry, I'm late. The last meeting ran over. You're coming in frantic. Your mental capacity is not there. Your emotions are stressed because you feel guilty, leaving that meeting. You feel guilty coming into the other one late. You were probably stressed for the last 5 minutes of the previous meeting because you're looking at the clock. You're like, oh my gosh, I hope this person wraps up. And then that one person asks a question with 1 minute left. You're like, why? And so it's really important that you block that time to say, I need 10 minutes after this meeting. I need 15 minutes after this meeting to go through my notes, to figure out what I need to do, to grab some water, to catch my breath, to delegate a couple of things, return a couple of emails. Those are really important things to do. And you can do those in 10 to 15 minutes, but we don't give ourselves that time. I call it the adult passing period, because in high school, middle school, we had that time in between classes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever it was, to do those things, to change gears, to shift gears from one thing to the next. But we don't do that as adults because we feel like we have to say yes. And if we have a gap on our calendar, it's almost kind of like throwing chum in a shark tank. Like you feel like somebody's going to snag it the minute they see it. So really be mindful. If you have 5-minute gaps in your schedule, now's the time to really go in and block those times. It is really, really important to do those things because, again, I go back to the whole, like, I don't have time. I just gave you 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Roma, I love that. Focus blocks, if you need to work on a project, I've done that too, where it's project time or, creative thought time. And I don't apologize for the way it's labeled because that's the things that I need to do for me. That's what I need to do to be the best individual that I can possibly be. So make that really dedicated time. And matter of fact, I want you to do that today because it is important because of this self-care mentality that we have the time to do it, that we have the ability to be more mindful and take better care of ourselves. Now, again, I keep hearing like, oh, self-care sounds great, but I don't have time to go to the spa. You don't have to go to the spa to do self-care. Self-care can be done, like I said, from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. Really, that's all you need. You can find 5 minutes. When you do, I mentioned the audit in the description of this webinar. If you do an audit, if you do a life audit and look at everything that you've done throughout the day, I had to do an audit when I lost a bunch of weight. I had to look at all the things that I ate, every single thing that went in my mouth, every single drink, every single piece of food, everything that went in my mouth. I had to document it to understand what was coming in. So if you go through your day and write down everything that you do and write down the amount of time that you spend doing it, you can find 5 minutes. So these are just a couple of examples where self-care can be implemented in 5 minutes or less. These are all very easy things to do. They're all really important to do. I have a document that I'm happy to share with all of you that has 45 more of these, that if none of these resonate with you, you can find something else to do in under 5 minutes. All of these reset our energy. They bring intentional joy into our day, like I mentioned before, but they allow us to take better care of ourselves. They allow us to be more intentional in our days, and they allow us to bring back the power. Because again, we throw our energy and we throw our time and we let everybody else take it from us all the time. So for 5 minutes, I used to be an international touring DJ. Music, listen to a favorite song, that is my go-to every single time. I have a Spotify channel of every mood that you can imagine. And I go to that Spotify every time I need a 5-minute break. And I listen to a song. My go-to song is Baby I'm a Star by Prince. If you have a go-to song that makes you feel good, drop it in the chat. We can build a playlist. But all of these things can be done in 5 minutes or less. So here's the chance that you now have to get your phone back out. I want you to turn your phone over. If it's been up the whole time, we'll talk about a penalty later on. But now is the time that I want you to go into your phone, pull up your Outlook, pull up your calendar, and block those times. Block the time after your meeting. So if you have a meeting on your calendar right now and there's a gap after it, block it right now. Protect that time. If you have an hour-long gap, add in 5 minutes of self-care. Call it my 5 minutes, whatever you need to call it. Come up with whatever keyword you want to come up with. But that is your 5 minutes to take care of yourself. Insert several of those throughout the entire day. Block 10 minutes at lunchtime. One of the biggest differentiations that you can make at lunchtime is just checking in with yourself. Maybe you started the day with your 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden your day got a little bit away from you. And by lunchtime, you were in a totally horrible mood. Taking that 10 minutes at lunch to say, what's happened throughout my entire day? Where did things change? You can pinpoint those activities or those individuals or those communications that sent you awry. So it's really important that you take that time to be mindful of what's impacting you. And at lunchtime is a great time to do it because you can catch your breath and say, okay, I'm halfway through my day. What is my mood right now? What happened that was good? What happened that was bad? Why am I mad? Why am I happy? Understanding those emotions, that makes you more mindful. It makes you more connected to your day. It makes you more connected to the activities. I'll share a quick story because we're getting close on time, but there was an individual at one of my law firms that I worked with that I had a meeting with him every Thursday. And every Wednesday, I would check my, at lunchtime, I would look at my next 24 hours, what was coming up that rest of that day and the next day. And every Wednesday, I started getting stressed out. And I would be stressed out from lunchtime at Wednesday. The meeting was always at 11 o'clock on Thursday. And then by 1:30, 2 o'clock on Thursday, it would start wearing off. But I was stressed out for over 24 hours because of this one individual. And I didn't understand why. And it was at that time that I started blocking that lunchtime to say, how is everything going? And I could put a title on what was stressing me out. And it was at that point that I took power back and I changed the reaction. So as opposed to going into that meeting because he was very abrasive in communication. He was not my style of communicator at all, usually very condescending. So instead of going into that, like, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this guy again, I went in with a very positive mentality and was like, hey, how's everything going? How are you doing? What can I do for you today? I took that power back for me only, because losing 24 hours of focus and losing 24 hours of energy was not doing anybody any good in my world. So block that time, block the time during lunch, block your 5 minutes, take control back over those meetings too. The next time you go to set a meeting, remember 20 or 45, no 30s, no 60s. And then be very deliberate with what you're doing. You will find that your power comes back in those instances. So I can't tell you how appreciative I am for all of you for blocking the time today to be here. It's very important. You've just exhibited that you do have the ability to take care of yourself. You do have the time to take care of yourself, and you do have the time to invest in yourself. So, I've got hacks galore. Like Shai said, I've been working with in-house teams and company organizations to provide these kinds of takeaways, to provide these kinds of workshops. We can go more in depth. I've got a laundry list of things that you can do to improve your days. But I am so thankful for each and every one of you. So if you do want to connect, if you do want to talk, this is a great opportunity to connect. For those of you that don't know, this is the LinkedIn QR code. So if you want to pull out your LinkedIn app, or your camera on your phone, you can scan this QR code. It goes directly to my LinkedIn profile. We'd love to hear from you. If there's something that you want to learn more about, if there's something that you want to talk about, if you want your team to hear more about how they can take better care of themselves so that they can all perform at a high level, then I'm happy to do that. But I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what aha moments you had. And, if you want to admit, hey, Rich, my phone was up the entire time, that's fine too. Cone of silence, you're totally protected. But yeah, I really want to be able to be of service to you all because you do so much for so many other people. So it's my honor and my privilege to provide this kind of information, and I'm happy to do it for you and your organization moving forward. So again, looking forward to chatting with some of you, and hopefully this provided a lot of value, and hopefully you spend your 2 minutes in the morning and take back the rest of the time throughout the entire day. But thank you all so very, very much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich, for a fantastic presentation. I mean, you were impressed by my intro, which was 4 minutes. This was, 40 minutes and far more impressive. So thank you, Rich. Tremendously appreciated it. I dropped a SurveyMonkey link in the chat. I'll do it one more time. It would be great to get your candid feedback. It helps us improve. It'll help Rich improve. We would appreciate your feedback. So please be sure to do that. If anybody has any questions, this is live Q&A right now. We got a great question before, so I'm going to go to that one first. But please, if you have questions or comments for Rich, please let us know in the chat. I believe the question was, and I have it written down, but it was basically, how do you set boundaries with a boss who doesn't appreciate boundaries?
That's a great question, because if you haven't worked for one, you will in your career. There are a lot of bosses and managers that don't respect boundaries. Leaders do. But what I will say is that you often can't control that. And so it's important to understand that your boundaries are yours to protect. Now, my grandfather always told me that the best way to sell someone is to make it their idea. And so what I started doing is I started going into those situations where I knew I was going to go up against an obstacle. And I thought about it from their perspective. Why don't they want boundaries set? You know, maybe they look at boundaries as weakness. Maybe they look at it as lost time. Maybe they look at it as productivity loss. So what I always, I kind of also invoke the rule of improv, where it's like, yes, and. So you're not saying no to something, but you're also providing an opportunity. So you could say, well, I need boundaries. I need to set boundaries. You can give them the option. Okay, I can be available 24 hours a day, or I could, have some boundaries and have a little bit of a limitation on that. I'm going to be healthier. I'm going to provide a better product. I'm going to be more efficient with my time. If there is something that rolls over that needs to be taken care of, I will absolutely take care of it tomorrow. You hired me because you knew I was competent and that I was responsible for my activities. So on the one hand, it's, you could just say, oh, sorry, I don't, maybe I don't need boundaries. Or you can say, if you want me at my best, here's what I need. I need to be able to unplug at 6 o'clock. I need to be able to not answer emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. Set those boundaries. Everybody's boundaries are different. You need to be the one that has the healthy ones. And so by providing that option, you're now putting it back on them to say, well, because think about that person that doesn't like boundaries. Well, do I want to burn out rich, or do I want to optimize rich? It's up to you. Like, I can be as efficient and effective as you want me to be, but there are things that I'm going to need to take care of myself.
Got it. Another question is, are we going to be able to share the slides afterwards? Is there like a cheat sheet that we can share? Okay, awesome. So email the RSVP list, or the attendee list rather, with the slides. So that's great. I guess last call for questions, and I'll offer up a question. I guess, what's like the number one, let's take away, the morning routine, not checking your phone when you wake up. That's a huge tip. But, during the workday, is there any tips that you recommend that's just an easy implementation?
So with the goal being focus and productivity?
Yeah. We're mindful and
sure.
And,
one of the things that I have found a lot of success with is that, I mentioned to-do lists earlier. Now, what I will say is that my to-do list got out of control, as I mentioned. But when you simplify your to-do list and you put I always put the thing that you don't want to do first, put that on the top of the list. I used to hate when I was a sales, when I would travel, I hate expense reports, hate them, hate doing them, love getting the money back, but hate doing them. And so I would always put expense reports at the top of my list because it was the least favorite thing to do. But once I got that done and it was out of the way, everything else was a piece of cake. So limit your to-do list, stay really concise with what you can do, because you can't do everything. Like, your to-do list is never going to be finished. So if you say, okay, here are the 3 things I'm going to do today, put the worst thing at the first, and then the other 2 things after that, but then also understand that completion, it's okay to celebrate it a little bit. Now, I'm not saying pop champagne at 9:30 because you knocked out your expense report, but, go get a coffee, go take a walk, go grab some water, understand that you did something good. That self-promotion energy actually benefits you throughout the day. It's almost like a very high investment that you make in yourself, because if you then accomplish that, and again, I think about Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live, I'm good enough, smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. If you got to go that route, go for it. I'll get you the mirror. But that little bit of self-promotion and self-positivity goes a long way throughout your day for productivity and happiness. So, short to-do list, knock out the worst thing first, and then self-promote throughout the entire day.
We have 2 more questions that came in. And before I get to the questions, have you heard of the rice experiment? I don't know.
Other than putting your phone in it after you drop it in water, no.
No. So basically, researchers took 2 jars of rice with water in it, And on one jar, they wrote happy words, happiness and joy and positivity and whatever. And on the another jar, they wrote negative words, F this and whatever, other bad words, right? So what happened was after this, 2 or 3 weeks, there was significantly more mold on the bad jar than on the good jar. So it's just like, the words you use, how you think, it really impacts. And it was, I did this in my own house and it was crazy. Like there was hardly any mold on the good rice and lots and lots and lots of mold on the bad rice. So, part of positivity is real.
And it's not just whether they're positive or negative words. There was a study, and I'm not going to say the percentage because I don't want to miscalculate it, but it was a very high percentage of individuals that use, I think it's 5 basic words like fine, good, bad, to describe how they are or describe how they feel. And so I will say that I have thesaurus.com up at almost all times, so I can go to use different words because I use words like amazing a lot. But be very specific with the word that you use for yourself. Yes, number one, use as many positive words as you can, but also be very specific and granular about what word that is. So if you're feeling good, okay, maybe you feel excited, maybe you feel hopeful, maybe you feel anticipatory. Think about those words because it actually puts more emphasis on the true emotion that you're feeling, because good is like peanut butter. It just spreads and covers everything. But if you're very specific about what you're thinking, what you're feeling, you can pinpoint the why of why you're feeling that way and the what that caused it. And you're more apt to be emotionally connected to that feeling, especially with positive feelings. So that's just a really good, strong investment.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, Eileen, for adding some color to that. It was Saru Emoto, who showed how this words could affect the molecular structure of water. It was just a groundbreaking study. They played music, classical music, and then they flash froze water, and the molecular structures of classical music was far different than heavy metal or whatever. It's really, really cool study. You should definitely check it out. So let's get to our audience's questions, digression. So Deborah is asking, what are your tips for getting started and staying on track?
Getting started with these habits, I'll give a nod to Peloton again. One of the things I think Peloton does a brilliant job of is what I call the badge theory. So if you work out a certain amount of days in a row, you get a notification that, hey, you've worked out 5 days in a row, congratulations, or 7 days in a row, or that you've accomplished this many miles. And so we are motivated by that recognition, even though it may be minute, even though it's a graphic digital sticker. Also, let me also say that we should get rid of all lawyer rankings. That's just my personal opinion. So insert that, whatever badge sticker that you want to put there. But really, it's all about consistency. And it's all about empathy within that consistency too, because what is it? I've heard different numbers, but it's 11 days to start a new habit. Maybe there's a bigger number. But if you are consistent a little bit every single day, kind of like we talked about with the boundaries, if you set a small boundary every day for 11 days, it could be a 5-minute boundary. It could be a 30-minute boundary. It could be a big conversation you need to have. But by being consistent every single day, you build that habit. And once you build that habit, it's a lot harder to break that habit, because then you start seeing the positive results from it. But also being very intentional. I mentioned putting those things on your calendar. Do those things. Set a reminder. I have friends of mine and colleagues of mine that will set reminders on their calendar to, and something pops up at 1 o'clock that says you're doing a great job. Those kinds of things go a long way. Yeah, they sound cheesy, but they work. And so I'll be cheesy and positive all day long and beneficial to myself and be more productive and be happier than being somebody like, oh, well, I just hope that things work out throughout the entire day. If you're intentional, if you're blocking that time to invest in yourself, if you're blocking the time for self-care, if you're protecting your time at work, that intentionality and that consistency goes a long, long way to building the positive habits.
Awesome. That you kind of answered the second question, but it was, how can you hold yourself responsible for holding the boundaries? And I guess through positive reinforcement was a big component of that.
Positive reinforcement too, but it's also you, and I've said this to people and they're like, oh, that sounds very conceited. I'm like, you are your number one priority, period. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not taking care of anybody else. I gave the comparison last week that you could be a great sports car. You could be the fanciest sports car in the world. If you don't have gas in your tank, what good are you? It doesn't matter. If you don't have a battery that works, what good are you? You're a pretty car that didn't go anywhere. So that is what's really important to understand, that if you don't protect yourself, if you don't protect your boundaries, if you don't protect your energy, you might as well just be as good as that car sitting in the garage or sitting in the parking lot that's not going to go anywhere because it's not fueled up. And so we are so quick to be people pleasers. We are so happy to do other things for other people until it gets to a point where we're doing so much for so many other people, and we're not doing anything for ourselves, that we drain our tank. And it will, if it hadn't happened to you yet, it will happen to you. And it's not anybody else's fault, because a lot of times they're like, oh my gosh, people are so demanding. No, you're letting them take it from you. It's your energy. It's your time. You can say no. Saying no is one of the hardest things in the entire world, but keep in mind, no is a complete sentence. You can say no to something. You can say no to a new project. You can say no to a new responsibility. You can say no to a new time suck request. You can say no to those things, or not yet. Like, I have this other thing that's my priority. I need to move on to this other thing after that. Can I get to you after those two things are done? Set those realistic expectations, because again, people are going to take as long as they see that there is something to take. So if you set that boundary and you understand that by protecting that boundary, you're actually going to produce a better product and be a better person, why wouldn't you want to do that for yourself and for everybody else around you?
Definitely. And I want to give a shout out to LaShonda. She dropped the link to Feelings Wheel. I never saw this before, and I checking it out, and it's awesome. It's really, really awesome. There's all the feelings,
now.
The secondary feelings, and I guess the, third degree feelings that originate from it. It is super cool.
That is cool. I like that.
Check and analyze it in more depth. So thank you, LaShonda. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Last question. And again, you do such a good job of answering questions. I think you kind of addressed this already, but any tips for deferring lower priority asks when there are limited delegation options?
What I will say, what I have done for myself, and what I've also encouraged others to do, is really focus in. I mentioned it earlier, that to-do list. Like, there are a lot, like, you can say yes to everything. Like, you can go and do all the things. Number one, you're probably not going to do them all very well. Number two, you may not get to them all. Number three, you will probably be exhausted and completely depleted by the time you do. What's important to understand is that you have a limited amount of time in a day. You have a limited amount of energy, emotionally and mentally, in a day. So focus on the things that are higher priority. It sounds easier. It is easier said than done, because again, we want to do all the things. But can you imagine, like, going to your CEO and saying, hey, look, we don't have anybody to take notes in this meeting. Can you come do it? What are they going to say? I'm not trying to minimize any other asks that get made of people, but I guarantee you, your CEO, although they may want to be, a team player, all of a sudden will also let you understand that, that's not the best use of their time. And yes, I understand that a lot of things need to get done, especially in smaller organizations or organizations that run in a leader model. Like, you feel like you have to do all the things. And so one of the things that I also would encourage is say, okay, look, if you've got this, we'll call it a list of 5 big priorities. And then you've got this list of what I call, there's the boulders, and then there's the pebbles that come along, to the small things that are maybe a little bit more delegatable, even though you may not have the resources, but they're not high priority. Put them on a list and block some time. So like, hey, I don't have time today, but tomorrow I have 2 hours of open time. I'm going to block those 2 hours to go after those things, because chances are the lower priority things, or the lower investment, will take less time. So if you can just block the dedicated focus time and go after that list, you'll probably get a lot of them, if not all of them, done.
That's awesome. So, and shout out to Roma, who uses the Warren Buffett 5-25 method. I've heard of that. It's a good method as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think we're out of questions. So we'll wrap up. Rich, do you have any last marks or comments for the audience before we sign off for the day?
No, again, I'm thrilled and can't thank you all enough. I understand that you all have very busy schedules. I am very grateful that you have dedicated this time for you and with us today. And again, this is an ongoing process. So you're not going to walk out of here and be like, nope, I got the world by the tail now. It's going to take some time. Be empathetic with yourself, be graceful with yourself. Understand that you're building new habits. but the investment that you make and the time that you take to do that is going to pay off tremendously in the long run. And you will be happier, again, both personally and professionally. So my thanks. And again, please feel free to reach out to me. The QR code, my website is richbracken.com. If you have any questions or anything you want to follow up on, or if you'd like me to come talk with your team, I would love to do that either in person or virtually. So happy to help out however I can. It's my passion to help people in the legal industry because I've seen too many people go the other way. So I want to do everything I can to share this information and share this empowerment so that you and your teams can be growing as individuals and be better off every single day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for In-House Connect. But in the meantime, I hope you have a great day and we'll reconnect soon. So thanks again, Rich. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and speak soon.